Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello.
Sorry, a little bit of lateness. Had to get things set up. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may be. If you're new to the show, what we do, we come on here every week, we dig underneath the dirt, talk about the stuff that the establishment media is not. We talk about local activism, political topics, so on and so forth. And you know, I think this week is very unique because I think like this might be the first week we've ever had where there's more good news than bad news.
Yeah, it's confusing. It feels weird to feel good about headlines nowadays.
Yeah. And granted, we are going to get to some stuff later on that'll make you mad at establishment politicians and whatnot, but...
that bank bill.
We're going to talk about that.
All I know is that both Michigan senators voted to loosen regulations on banks. That's all I know.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. And,
both of them. Both of them.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, the sign that so I went to protest Mr. Richard Spencer on Monday, and my sign said the only dangerous minority is the rich. So I wish that our senators understood that as well as we do.
That's a little on the nose for a lot of people.
Oh yeah. In particular, and we'll start with this topic anyway. And you know, one of the things that made me really sit down and make that sign in particular. So I heard coming up to the demonstration, and I'll be talking a little bit about this overall politically, and also a little bit of eyewitness account type stuff, but. What really made me want to bring that sign up was apparently, and I did not, we didn't find this out until a few days before the rally, is that the Traditionalist Workers' Party was going to have a presence there, and I think I have seethed about them on the show before.
I saw a picture on Facebook actually of them somewhere. They had an anti-fascist presence there against them, and I think their leader got punched.
Oh, you're talking about the picture where like he's like looking like this.
Please don't hit me.
Yeah. Matthew Heimbach.
Was that from like?
Yeah, that was from Monday.
That was from Monday. Yeah, all right.
And the reason I hate like
genocide law.
Hate's a strong word, but strongly loathes the Traditionalist Workers' Party, even more than like say the Proud Boys or 3%ers or even some of the more like militant neo-Nazi groups, is that the Traditionalist Workers' Party, if you could tell by the second letter in that formation, is that they co-opt a lot of the language of anti-capitalists and the populist left. I remember
this guy now. This guy. Actually, Kyle Kalinske did a bit talking about this group that this guy leads, and he essentially co-opts populist talking points and then jumps like to the wrong conclusion of, so let's kick out all the brown people.
Oh yeah, or my sign is talking about the rich, which to like the TWP, that would be code for like anyone Jewish. It's part of why like George Soros kind of bleeds down into some of the less abrasive parts of the alt-right, and why that gets thrown around all the time. Is like they believe there's an oligarchy, but it's run by a bunch of
but it's run by the Jews.
It's run by the Jews.
Oh, get it. Yeah. Did you know that George Soros is simultaneously one of those manipulative, I have my fingers puppeteering everything Jews, but he was also a supporter of the Holocaust.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah, he was also a Nazi.
Yes, and of course we all know how Jewish the Koch brothers are.
Yeah.
And no, really, the easiest way to debunk that racist myth making
that's
is
garbage.
I mean, the oligarchy is a rainbow coalition of many creeds and beliefs. And overall, it's just like they may worship a different god. In public, but privately they all worship the money,
The almighty dollar.
the almighty dollar. Yes.
A vast rainbow of creeds and ideologies of old white people.
Yes. Okay, so getting that out of the way, we started going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, unnecessary one, but let's talk a little bit more about the actual rally and what was accomplished, and this is something that I've heard tossed around by some people. What did you guys accomplish going up there to confront these Nazis? And most tangibly, and this is kind of on the ground what happened. Spencer, he was scheduled to speak at 4:30. It got pushed off to about 5. Because there were some clashes between all of the neo-Nazis and the anti-fascist supporters, which, by the way, it was a very diverse group, I should say. You had DSA members, anarchists, communists, even a lot of more mainstream liberals turned out to commit their support. So I think a lot of people have this idea that when the Nazis show up, it's just it's only the black bloc that shows up.
No, it's everybody, man.
Yeah. Not everybody there was looking to get in a fist fight with a Nazi, and it's commendable that a lot of the speakers talked about you need to respect and diversity of tactics. I personally, I am more or less dedicated to nonviolence. I am willing to put my body in between a Nazi and his objective of getting inside to hear Richard Spencer. It's part of what, I did. But I'll leave the punches thrown to other people, but I completely respect that, of course. Again, we pushed it off to about 5 p.m. And about less than 3 dozen Nazis actually got in to the arena. They'd expected about 100, and over the weekend it kept going down. They originally expected a couple hundred, and then they expected about 300, and then Detroit was also a complete S show for Richard Spencer and his motley crew of hateful white trolls. They were chased all over the city. They weren't allowed to basically meet anywhere once various restaurants and bars found out what they were actually all about. And even in Lansing too, they had to resort to clandestinely giving out tickets to the event in a Macy's parking lot.
That's sad. That's actually sad.
Yeah. Oh yes.
It's just that's how you'll never be an actual mainstream ideology, and how you're never going to catch on is because you rode this big populist wave and had your 15 minutes in the spotlight because of that, last year. Mm-hmm. And ever since you got punched, people show up to try to do it again. And that sort of dissuades people to come to your events. Honestly, it's just that big populist wave that you rode. It's gone. It's gone.
The high watermark for kind of the Trump bump and the neo-Nazi movement was probably Charlottesville.
Probably was.
If you look
that resulted in another black mark socially against your group.
Yeah, and not to mention too, up to that point, it'd been looking. I would recommend It's Going Down has a really good chronology on this. There was a recent article they published, something about like kind of a year in review. But yeah, it was not looking all that great. Particularly, like there was a lot of clashes out in Berkeley where the fascists had a handful of solid victories, but Charlottesville kind of turned the tide. It not only in the eyes of the public, but also in the strength of this anti-fascist organizing. You know, one talking point here again and again, both in like organizing and participating in something like this, is well, you know, you're just giving him the attention he wants. We should just ignore it. Da 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 da. I want to stop right there and tell you, the reason we go up there to stop them, not only is it because it feels good to confront Nazis, it feels like the right thing to do, it's because it works. It has been proven to work. Let us remember it was Boston last year, very, very shortly after Charlottesville. And you had this dynamic where in Charlottesville, large numbers of fascists turned out. And it was pretty even keeled with the anti-fascists. And when it came around for Boston, thousands and thousands of people came out into the streets to confront a couple dozen right-wing Nazi types. And they were outnumbered by, I think it was about like 10 to 1. And it was so embarrassing. They basically got like cloistered off in a gazebo and were not able to do anything significant whatsoever. And so, like, that's something I always like to point to when I say, yes, it works when this happens. And similarly, in Lansing, it wasn't by quite that margin, but, you know, I clearly remember a point where, so Heimbach and his team of hateful little white boys was marching down the road. And I can't remember I didn't see the exact number. I wasn't on, like, the front lines for this sequence of events, but they were marching down the road towards the venue. The anti-fascists met with them. They clashed. There was a battle, and the fascists went running with their tail between their legs back to the parking lot across the street. And from what I saw, actually, a bunch of the Lansing police vehicles actually came to that parking lot. Basically keep an eye on these Nazis. From what I'd heard, they were basically kind of like licking their wounds and trying to find like objects they could use as weapons to like come back and regroup. And they either were prevented or did not end up actually doing that. And then through the rest of it, beyond that one main group that like with Heimbach and all them, there was just like straggling small groups of fascists would try to come in, and mostly very professional looking white people, like a la Richard Spencer.
Yeah, the intellectualization of fascism and racism, you know, it's tried and true strategy.
Yeah. And you know, between that and like a few other more hardcore neo-Nazis, it was between the anti-fascists and the fascists, it was, I would liken it to a very, like, imagine Red Rover, but the other team would like to see you dead and might perhaps try to do that. So, you know, Red Rover, send the Nazi scum right over, and we will prevent you from actually being able to go inside and see, you know, El Duce in this. I will say, though, there was a lot of tussling with the police, and there wasn't any tear gas or rubber bullets or anything like that deployed. Of course, a big factor in that probably has to do with, you know, Michigan State University has been receiving a lot of bad PR lately, and having police brutality or something like that added onto it probably wouldn't be so great. But I did see, I mean, there was a lot of tension between the anti-fascists and the police, and they did protect, Richard Spencer did get inside, and probably the most grossest moment was they were right out in front of the venue. There was a line of cops. Spencer and his toadies were standing behind the police, basically gloating at all the anti-fascists. And so you could just see he's like smiling. He's like, ah ha ha, you can't punch me because I'm behind the cops.
I'm behind the cops. I got inside. I won. Ha 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 ha. Look at me. I won. I beat you. I beat you. It's like, yeah, okay, dude. Go speak to a room of 30 people.
Yeah, go speak to an empty room.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Like, actually, we won. Thanks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then after that, there was still a lot of tense interactions with the police. People were wondering if they were going to engage in mass arrests or not. But eventually, like, it kind of just dissipated because, it pretty clear that, like, the objective was to put a damper on the event, keep attendance down. We didn't actually keep Spencer out of there, but yeah, he was again speaking to primarily an empty room.
I mean, and at the same time, like, the dude is allowed to speak. Ultimately, I think it was better to delay his speech by however long you could maintain that buffer and make it known that it's like, we're not going away anytime soon. Mm-hmm. Delaying the speech, honestly, I think is as good as letting him speak, because eventually, if you just hold out, the people will, do their own kind of opportunity cost analysis of the situation. It's like, okay, well, do I really want to try and push my way through 100 people to go hear this dude talk? Are his ideas really that important to me?
Yeah.
Like, just kind of having that extended force of will, but still allowing it to actually happen, I think is actually the best way to have handled it. And from what I hear and from what I read, it sounds like that some groups there were kind of clusters of anti-fascists, hanging around for after the event, and they managed to essentially run Spencer out of town.
Yeah.
He'd show up somewhere. It's like, okay, motel. Nope, there's the anti-fascists. What up? It's like, get out of Lansing.
Yeah, like the very I saw this clip where, like, they're giving up. They're gonna head back to whatever, like, hole they crawled out of, and like he's trying to, like, he went to get coffee at a Starbucks, and like somebody was like, "Wait a minute, that's him." Yes, and he couldn't even slap the coffee out of hand. It's like, get out of Lansing, go.
That's amazing. Yeah. Honestly, that's the way that guy should be treated for forever. Yeah, dude, show up. Say your piece. It's your right.
He said, like, I just can't believe all of these people trying to prevent my peaceful free speech. He literally did say peaceful, by the way, non-violent peaceful free speech that advocates mass genocide. But
well, I mean, it's one of those things where the legal limits of the First Amendment are still cover that, still protect that. Mm-hmm. Garbage, because it's not direct.
Yes.
It's not direct.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, I just think it would be a really good idea if we kicked out all the brown people and made a white ethno state in the state. I just think that'd be a really good idea. I'm not directly implying that I would be. It's like I'm not trying to imply that I would be directly violent to any of these people. I just think it would be a really good idea if only white people were in America. It's like you're riding on such a thin line of technicality with that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, that. Here's a thing, and just kind of like touching again on like why people organize in this way. One, I want everybody to know, like, we've been doing a pretty good job. Look at there is footage of the Nazi rallies happening. This is like in the lead up to World War II. Nazi rallies that would fill up Madison Square Garden. Again, like, even during World War II, there was a lot of sympathy for Hitler and his cause. And also in comparison, there was recently a fascist right-wing march in Poland that was about 10,000 strong. And to our credit, here in America, that kind of mobilization is not one that we have seen. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that you have people out there in large, significant numbers willing to form a broad coalition to go to these events and, shout, Nazis go home.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And the big takeaway from this too, that I'd like a lot of people to remember is, this is an important battle, but it's not. It isn't the main thing, particularly as we've seen, like these fascist Richard Spencer and his ilk have been trying to rebuild the momentum that they lost near the end of last year, and they've been having a very hard time doing it. So, to my mind, I feel like these overt clashes are gonna become less common.
Yeah, I think that too. Just like as it winds down, as people just kind of dismiss these people like out of hand, as they just like, unless they can actually get that big push of momentum again, which I honestly don't think is going to happen.
Yeah.
Like they're just going to go away. So honestly, the best way to combat it is constant vigilance.
Constant vigilance and
vigilance.
Think less in terms of when am I going to get to punch a Nazi, and more in terms of, do you have like a nephew? Do you have like some obscure person in your social media network, or someone who's a young and white and is starting to maybe be targeted or starting to spew like some really toxic ideas?
Yeah, that's when you got to start talking to them. Mm-hmm. You got to talk to them. Like, I've seen one or two Twitter threads and Tumblr chains about when exactly these groups start grooming these people to be a part of them. And honestly, like reading through it, it's the same kind of recruitment and grooming tactics that ISIS uses. It's the same like any other kind of terrorist organization. Make big promises, make the person who's probably feeling really low part of the group, laugh with them, normalize the attitudes of the group with that person over and over and over again, and the way to stop that is by honestly talking to them from outside of that group and not treating them like a garbage human person.
Right.
Because really, this is stuff that can be unlearned. Richard Spencer, even though he is a walking pile of garbage human being, still has the potential to realize that, holy crap, I was wrong the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So even a piece of garbage like him can be redeemed if, something earnest and honest happens.
Something that gets lost a lot in these conversations, and forgive me, I don't remember the name of the actual group that does this kind of work, but there are groups of like former ex-neo-Nazis out there who have seen the light and have reformed, and they do this kind of outreach effort. So, my whole thing is like, yes, I don't think it's inappropriate to challenge or like defend others against Nazi violence. Make that punch, but also understand that I don't like this idea that no one is beyond redemption, because I think you've seen it, people can reform, and honestly, like people who have been part of that racist movement, they can reach other people in that movement a lot easier than people who are completely and have always been invested in left-wing social justice movements.
I mean, and it is one of those things where the best way to combat this kind of intolerance is inclusion. Like, it's just... It's just drawing that distinct fine line. It's like, okay, you can hang out with us now because you're not, like, saying that you want to kill all the Jews, but you're not actually saying that. You're saying something else. But you cut that crap out because you realize that it was wrong and you apologize, you know, all of that. It's one of those things where, like...
And by the way, that entirely falls on the shoulders of white people. I say, like, there were a lot of non-white folks at that rally, and I like give them like a special tip of my hat because, like, it's, you know, to deal with Nazis that directly, people who look at you, it's like, you know, Nazis will look at someone like me and be like, what a misguided race traitor. They'll look at, you know, someone who's black or someone who's Muslim and be like, that person should be dead.
Yeah.
And to deal with that, like, man, like, really, thank you. And also, particularly in this type of, like, you know, white people, we gotta clean out our own house, clean out our own attic. So.
I just kind of want to like touch on how ridiculous of a phrase race traitor is.
Oh yeah.
That's like a really ridiculous phrase. It's super tribalistic where, you know, you're not, there's no tribe. No.
Yeah.
Because scientifically speaking, we're all the same race.
Yeah, and it's like, you really break it down, like, why do I look the way I look? Well, it's because a few thousand years ago, a bunch of Africans decided, hey, you want to go check out Denmark? Yeah. It would have been the Netherlands. I'm sorry, but yeah. All right. I'm gonna go actually, it's about good time for a break.
Yeah.
So when we get back, I'm gonna dive into some other topics. Maybe talk about that statue. You're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Are you trying to get your local Kalamazoo business name out to the WMU and Greater Kalamazoo communities? Why not do so while supporting Radio Evolution through underwriting and donations? For more information, please visit widrfm.org.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. Well, we just wrapped up talking about Richard Spencer and his little visit. So, you know what? If you know not, there are some racist shenanigans in our own backyard, but much like what we were just talking about with Richard Spencer, the people of Kalamazoo were able to make a lot of good points and shut some stuff down, or I guess take some stuff down. Really would be more appropriate to say. So we're joined on the program now by our dear friend Nora.
Hello again.
And she was also there at the meeting. And for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, we actually had our Eugene Strong on last week to discuss this. The Fountain of the Pioneers in Bronson Park. It's a statue that was made early 20th century by Alfonso Iannelli. Art Deco, and it was masterfully made, and it depicts the noble subjugation of the native to westward expansion.
Isn't that a oxymoron? Noble subjugation?
Okay, so let's work through this a little bit.
What is that vernacular?
Well, to Iannelli's credit, and this is what a lot. By the way, I learned an important lesson because I've been doing some organizing around the statue, and something very important I learned is never underestimate the power of old rich white people with way too much time on their hands, because they will get very whiny, they will get very defensive, and they will demand things because art.
But art and history and art history and history art.
And the history of art. The history of art in our park. Oh.
Brutalism is... I'm sorry. Brutalism is ugly. Concrete is a terrible medium.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what the heck that statue was until someone told me what it was.
Yeah. Well, I joked about it at two of the meetings. Like, in high school when I went to Norix, the few times we talked about the statue... Like, when we're talking about it in the cafeteria, and it's like, 14, 15 years old, it's like, yeah, it looks like, doesn't it look like, the native dude is, like, being forced to give the pioneer a blowjob? And so, like, we would just kind of refer to it offhand as the racist blowjob statue. When you mention that when you mention that to a room full of art historians, they get a little perturbed. You could hear a monocle drop in that city commission meeting.
Well, I mean, I hate to say it to you, fancy old people with your art monocles, but art is subjective.
Yeah, it definitely is. And also, times change. That's a big thing. Because, one thing they'd bring up over and over again is how Alfonso was a radical, he was a socialist, my favorite one is he actually went to live with the Sioux I think he was the Sioux tribe, and what did the guy say, one of the Dakotas, but he was talking about how he actually went to go live with the natives for a while, so you have to understand where the artist was coming from. And something Nora, we talk a lot about this in our activist circles, is impact over intent. And particularly with the statue, I think the impact of it has certainly changed a lot over time. Would you agree?
I think the impact of it's very clear nowadays, because if you listen to the indigenous activists who spoke out about how this statue makes them feel in the city public comment, and even outside of that, it really hits them in ways that it wouldn't for non-native people. This is a symbol of for those of you who aren't know what we're talking about, this ugly statue in Bronson Park, you probably don't even know what it is until someone tells it you, like Lucian says, is a statue of a white settler dude standing over a Native American with a club. And You know, it's in a public place, a lot like those Confederate monuments you see around.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I keep on bringing this up, like specifically because I think it's accurate. Like it also shows a very dark and ugly part of our history we should not be proud of. In the very same way that the Confederate monuments do, and seeing like these so-called white liberals like trying to back it up is just bonkers to me. But I guess I shouldn't be terribly surprised. It's a lot of the same arguments too, like, oh, we value our history, it's a public work of art. Like it's satire at this point, almost hearing them like just parrot these talking points that would be used to defend the Confederate monuments.
I mean, on the same point, like, I actually get in because I hate myself. This is the constant thread. Luke hates himself, so he participates in online dialogue, i.e., flame wars that he starts by having liberal opinions. Something that I've run into a lot, actually, when talking about this statue online within the comments of Channel 3 News and WWMT and MLive, really whoever decides to actually post a local story about it, is should we be, the question I posit is, should we be proud of white colonialism? Should we be proud of the subjugation and elimination of entire cultures? Should we be proud of that? Is that something that we should actually like display in a central position within our city? Like, if we want to pay tribute to our history, then I agree that something should be there. But at the same, and I agree that we shouldn't just destroy the thing. Like, I don't think we should just like knock it down and reconstitute its materials and build a parking lot or something. Like, if you want to make the argument that it shouldn't be destroyed because it has artistic significance about a person's perspective about that period in time, then you know what? I agree with you. Give it a permanent exhibit at the KIA.
And I do want to interject real quick, because there was one of the things about the opposition, and what I mean by that is the people who wanted the statue to stay, that I found really dishonest, is they kept talking about the need to preserve the statue, as if everyone on the opposite side was talking about just like taking sledgehammers to it. And to be clear, basically everybody that I've seen speak on this issue, from the natives, local population, has said either move the statue or I don't care what happens to it. No one has seriously been advocating to destroy the thing.
It's almost like it's almost kind of like a direct allegory to when a mass shooting happens and the conservative gun nuts immediately jump to, they're trying to ban all the guns, when when the actual argument is, actually, we just kind of want to put stricter controls on it. We want to make sure that there's like a good paper trail about who owns the weapons, and actually, make sure that people are actually personally responsible and know how to handle these things.
Well, in terms of taking the statue down versus putting it in the museum, I think most of us that were in favor of removing it from the Central Park did want to actually see it moved to the museum. Because a museum, as I've said in my first public comment in the full meeting about the statue, was that a place to appreciate art and history in a place that provides proper context is exactly that. It's a museum. Unfortunately, we don't have a museum that's in the nearby area that wants to buy it off the city, and removing it from one place to the other is the most expensive option. Now, one of the talking points was, we can't do that. We can't move the statue because people have already given money to the Bronson Park Fund or the Foundation for Excellence, which was like maybe 2 or 3 philanthropists that might have been specifically predicated on that, honestly. But if you really look at the numbers, the cheapest option by far is just smash it. It's way cheaper than renovating it, and renovating it's only slightly cheaper than moving it to a museum. I mentioned that also that I would be open to either moving it to a museum or just destroying it. But if, I think it might be worth the trade-off if we're able to put it towards other things like, better flooding protections, for example, or other things the city might need, like roads, public schools. Do we see the same people speaking out when our public schools have been needing help for months? Like when they care so much about our education? Like that's what I'm getting from this.
Yeah, I mean, when you do just kind of boil it down to the numbers, then I suppose that the fears of, oh, you just want to smash art, get a little founded. But I come back to brutalism sucks. Concrete is a terrible medium.
Yeah.
and everything that you like about that statue, I hate. So I wouldn't mind it if it just disappeared into rubble.
Right. And, again, if you haven't been kind of following this, one of the ironies of this topic is the people who have come to defend the statue are not, like, people who are overtly, like, tradition, or, like, conservative. It has essentially been, like, the white liberal class that has been pouring into these meetings about keeping the statue. And I think it's important to talk about, like, the context of Iannelli and, what he meant with it, but also why that it's still inappropriate to have that statue there. Because, you had an artist who, in his mind and by the standards of the time, felt he was honoring the natives with this type of statue, talking about, like, the absorption of the natives as the pioneer went across the West. And the problem with that is, even if you are sympathetic in that time and place, even if you understood the native issues of what this would have been like, the 1910s, 1920s, our culture has shifted. And the awareness of native issues has really shifted tremendously as well. The native population, at that time in the early 1900s, there was a very serious question of whether or not the natives would just go extinct, because up until the late 19th century, they were still paying people to come collect native scalps.
Yeah. My friend Rick messaged me about this, listening in. Shout out to Rick. Mm-hmm. Says, I think this is kind of poignant, so I just kind of want to share it out.
Okay, yeah, great.
There's a significant lack of local history in this area that represents populations indigenous to this area beyond 100 years ago. If you view Michigan in context, or say, view Michigan in a broader context, you don't see the representation of the local native population. You see the evidence of its subjugation and elimination. Where is that art history? Pretty sure it was smashed over by the kind of people defending that statue.
Yeah, on the nose right there. And so kind of wrapping up too, and that was a great thought. Thank you, Rick. Wrapping up what I was talking about. So the difference between then and now is that, no, the native populations of this nation, they did survive. And you know what? The problem is they survived, and they're still surviving, because, among any demographic, they still face some of the highest poverty rates, some of the highest rates of brutalization by the police. Something so vividly, when I tell my personal connection to that statue is, I talk a lot about how I went to Standing Rock. You see a pioneer with a club over a Native American. I literally have seen riot cops with a club over Native Americans, and this was a year and a half ago. And so, like, the idea that this statue has a positive connotation, that it's a memorial to the absorption of the native, is disrespectful in a modern context, because Native people are still alive. They are still facing a multitude of various injustices, and that doesn't serve as a memorial to an extinct race. It serves as a reminder of how they are still being subjugated to this day. I'm sorry, I was kind of, somebody bounce off of that, I don't know. Okay, well, actually,
yeah. So, I guess even going off the whole, the points about, like, what our history versus what's going on today, like, and who gets listened to and who gets represented. towards the very beginning of the public comments of the city commission meeting. I'm not sure if this has been uploaded yet to YouTube or elsewhere.
It has, and it's about 6.5 hours long if y'all got some time to kill.
I think that, if I'm not mistaken, that same 6-hour video might not include it because it goes even past, way after I commented. But that's beside the point. Anyway, so early on in the public comments, there were, I think it was 6, maybe more, Indigenous women who did like a really detailed presentation about Native American history. Like, I was truly amazed they were able to fit that much, important and telling info into 24 minutes, but they did it. And they had their own art pieces and images to back it up, and plenty of historical context as well. So if that ever gets uploaded, do give it a watch. I'm gonna post it if I ever find it.
If we get a time code, we'll let y'all know, because that was one of the best parts of that whole speech. And I think didn't they go right after like some old guy who just gave like the most problematic, like everybody's obliquely racist grandpa is gonna come up and talk about the statue. It was like, well, what's all this? Oh, everybody's talking about racism. What's all this racism shenanigans going? I came down, I drove down 30 minutes, and I don't know what the big deal is.
Back in my day, this wasn't something anybody talked about because everyone around in a 100-mile radius was white.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But we didn't like them Irishmen, though.
No, it is.
I think you mentioned Saranac. It would have taken them like an hour and a half to get down here. That makes it even more unsettling.
Sorry, guy.
Going back to the art thing, though. So, renovating the statue was also part of the Kalamazoo's Foundation for Excellence so-called master plan. But that master plan also included taking down the other fountain statue, and by that I mean when freedom and justice prevail, children may play safely, I believe the title is.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And nobody made a fuss over that. Nobody. Like, you didn't hear it on the news. You probably didn't see it even on the city comments. Like, it's not an offensive statue by any means. It's just a bunch of metal kids in a little pool of the middle of a park. But like the rationale behind it was that people were climbing on it. Like, it's still like holds up like better than the other statue did, and I'm rather sad to see that one go. Like, I hope they relocate that one to a museum, honestly.
Oh yeah, and that's important to bring up too, because a lot of there's been this the spin on it that it's a part of our history. You can't ever take a statue down, when in fact, like, there's been different installations in Bronson Park through its history. Granted, the Ian Ellie statue's been up there for a pretty long time, but there's been other statues and other fountains there before Ian Ellie created his piece. And the idea that, like, it should just be that for the rest of time, forever and ever, even outside of talking about the racist nature of the statue or the controversy around it, even that's kind of ridiculous, I mean, we could talk about, there are permanent structures, pieces of a city that, yes, those are things you should never touch. Think about like the Eiffel Tower, or, even here in Kalamazoo, like, maybe like the KPH Tower, or even the building at East Hall. That was an important controversy. Somebody even kind of brought that up, but the compromise there is like you still had the building at the top of the hill that symbolized like the beginning of Western Michigan University, but they were able to renovate around it. I thought that was a really good compromise. Likewise with this statue, okay, maybe don't dismantle it, but it's time. Something new should go there, and it is not unprecedented for them to replace pieces in the park.
Also, brutalism sucks.
Yeah, yes.
So it's ugly. Why is it there? Just move it. Just get rid of it. Put something more aesthetically pleasing. Yeah. Something that matches the library that's across the corner. Like, honestly,
and like
honestly, the architecture of downtown as it's begun, like as it's modernized, as I've watched it modernize over the last decade that I've lived here, like, it just doesn't fit really with the direction that downtown is heading as far as art, as far as the architecture goes. So just put something in there that matches that. We're getting rid of brutalistic structures. We're getting rid of all of that. We're moving forward.
Also, like, I want to speak about how out of touch a lot of these defenders of the statue are. And, like, well, even if I'm taking their arguments at face value to say that it creates discussion or it helps us remember a bad history. What happens if people actually see the statue, both locals and visitors? I would say the vast majority of people aren't even going to notice it.
Yep.
Then you have the people who are going to notice it. They're going to see a pioneer with a club, an Indian, like, you know, under him, and they're going to be like, hey, that's a white guy, like, about to beat an Indian. And then you have the native folks who are going to come to that park, and as so many of them eloquently put, be traumatized or reminded of the history of subjugation that is happening against them. And then you're going to have, a handful of rich white people who are going to come down there and have, like, a discussion around the statue. Like, who does that actually...
You forgot the group of high school teenagers who come down, realize what it is, and go, man, that looks like a racist blowjob.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Like, you bring up a good point there, because there's so much that, like, you know, they say it's about education, but, like, there's so much it really doesn't teach. Like, first of all, you have to know what the statue is. Mm-hmm. You have to know that what the artist's intent, like, supposedly was. You have to understand that that's not even how that Potawatomi native peoples even dressed. They didn't have those kind of headdresses.
It's a generic headdress.
Yeah, really.
It doesn't really represent either the tribe that was here or really... It's like the stereotypical Indian look.
You don't really learn much about architecture design from that either. Like, I know art people. Like, there's no shortage of art students here in Kalamazoo, and it makes me wonder just how much these old white people, like, studied their art in the first place.
Yeah, it's like, also, like, look, a lot of people know what Art Deco is. We don't need E&L's statue to teach us this. We grew up in the 90s. We watched Batman, okay?
Best series, best Batman.
Yeah. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right there, Nora. And it doesn't unless you had one of these people who is standing, unless they hired someone to just stand outside that fountain and explain it to whoever would listen, most people are never going to get that context when they go to see the statue. And even with, like, the plaques and education material that they're going to be putting there, that's still not many people who are actually going to sit there and read it. And
so I think I've figured it out. It's the elitists who want to keep their special things.
Yeah,
it's just the elitists. Like, well, I know that the intent of the statue, and I know the history, and I know it's like good. That's nice. The rest of us don't really care.
Go talk about it in a museum. Put a positive piece in there that will actually get people talking about Native American history. You could put a positive piece in there that has some explanatory stuff about the actual history of the Potawatomi, and that's going to be a lot more effective than an honestly pretty ugly Art Deco statue. Nora.
Oh, I wasn't going to say anything.
Sorry, I thought you were raising your hand.
I think I'm out of talking points.
Yeah. Okay, but just wrapping, I don't even know if we mentioned this the whole time we've been talking about it, but the city commission did in fact vote to take the statue down. Woo, yeah. So
I believe we can just cap it off with a good riddance and call it a day.
Yeah. So I want to thank everybody who was involved in the efforts. Push that, and there are a lot of people who are still upset about this, and if there are people you think you can have a conversation with, go ahead and do it. If not, save your breath. And I also want to thank Nora Getz, the woman, for talking about this on our show. As not sir, as some elected officials would say. Do you mind if I mention that on the show?
Sure.
Our dear friend Nora here got misgendered by the mayor, and he did apologize later in the evening. It's like, oh, everybody makes mistakes, blah blah blah. But at the time, you were clearly in a red dress with like makeup on, and you are someone the mayor has interacted with on several occasions. So, yeah.
It's not something I'm thrilled about, but I'm glad that he at least did that. What I'll say is I'm more happy about the statue going down than I am frustrated about getting misgendered, though it does still really suck getting it from my effing mayor.
Yeah.
I want to mention that the vote was 5-1 to take it down, with the vice mayor absent, and Commissioner Urban being the only commissioner to keep it.
He was the only dissenting vote. Actually, if you want to hear more about Urban's opinion on it, we interviewed him several months back before the city commission mayoral election. He's got a nuanced defense of it, but it's a lot of that whole, like, we've got it. It starts a conversation. It's an educational piece, and you know what? One thing he did say at the meeting is, I want people to keep talking about it, and I want people to keep getting educated about Native issues in the area. And, I think that is important. That's true. And I would say anybody sincere about that, let's start with what's going on in our Kalamazoo Public Schools.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I think we're going to take a break. You're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Hey, this is These United States, which is a band playing for you our instruments backwards. Now we're going to speak with you briefly backwards for a moment while we play our instruments for you forwards. You're listening to WIDR
89.1 Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Radio forwards.
WIDR is proud to be supported by Pedal Bicycle. Pedal Bicycle has 2 locations, on 611 West Michigan Ave and 185 Romans Road. More information can be found at pedalbicycle.com.
My name's DJ Red Special, and I host the Iron Temple. Each Monday night at 10 o'clock p.m., I'm in here playing a wide variety of metal music, including black metal, doom metal, progressive metal, death metal, and more. We're rocking out to classic tracks from years past, as well as fresh tracks from brand new releases. If you want to hear what all this heavy metal noise is all about, take a journey to the Iron Temple, right here on 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for metal evolution.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. Coming in the second hour, there's going to be, we're going to broaden out a little bit, talk about things a little bit more national in scope. Did want to follow up just a couple things with the statue discussion. And that is to say, there's still a lot of discussion about what is actually going to be done as far as replacing it. And, I think it's an important discussion to really have as far as, okay, well now, more or less like now what? What are we going to do next? And I did want to play a brief clip from one of the speakers because it was really powerful. We'll do that real quick and then we'll hop on our next topic.
Ndeshnakas, Manawito Quet, Ninishnabe no swin, Mang Owendodum, Bodwadmi Quayendao, Shishibaniak Ninabendagwaze. I am citizen Ban Potawatomi, so we are actually located in Oklahoma. I am a direct descendant of a 9-year-old girl who was removed on the trail of death. And I have returned back to Michigan with my partner because we want to be home. We want to be in our homelands with our ancestors and our people. And I'm 26, he's 28. We're thinking about family, our family coming to visit. We want it to be a place that is welcoming to Native people. We want to honor our ancestors. And also with that comes education. I'm a certified teacher. I attended the University of Texas during the time that the discussions of the Confederate statues on the South Lawn was occurring, and the year of my graduation was when they decided overnight to remove them. And that took student pressure and alumni pressure because huge donors with deep pockets did not want those statues removed. And what happened was, so during my teaching program, we walked that South Lawn. We discussed the history of that, why those statues were there. And I can't tell you, the most educational thing was returning back to campus with those statues gone. Those statues are in a museum. There's a context for them. And you can learn about our nation's history there instead of having to face them every single day, as many Native people do. And so, also, along with that educational piece, I encourage you not only to work with Gun Lake. This is Potawatomi land. There are multiple bands of Potawatomi that call this place home. We need to recognize all those histories of this place. We all have connections to this place, deep connections, generations. People have been talking about being lifelong residents. My family had been here for generations. My great-great-great-grandmother was a child, and she was removed from this place. And so we have to remember those histories. That is a depiction of my family history, and that is not how that family history is taught. That story, that history remains with our families. We need to go to our Native families to understand the histories of this place.
All right, I'll leave it off there, but that was just, it was probably the most powerful comment of the night, and particularly just really illuminating the context from somebody who literally might have lived here in Kalamazoo had it not been for the white colonizers. So, with that, let's go to like a little bit more of a sprightly topic. I mean, well, I guess this is more of a, is there like a good news, bad news situation? I did follow some of the results going on in the primaries. It's mostly a lot of pretty good news. But there was also a little bit of shenanigans. But Nora, I know you're the one who brought this up, and you know, one of the things that was really unprecedented about the Texas primaries is there was a unprecedented number of female candidates out running, and also a lot of really progressive ones. We actually brought up Laura Moser on the show before because she was being targeted by corporate Democrats. Moser. Oh, sorry. Say that again.
Triple C.
Wait, one more time.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
Do triple C one after.
Sorry,
there you go.
We just plugged Nora's mic in. So
hello.
Yeah.
I usually wind up plugging it into 4 just to buy reflex. So.
Oh yeah. Some good news and some bad news from that. But I mean, what's good is Texas had unprecedented turnout for the Democratic primary. It was now still more Republicans turned out. I mean, let's remember. I mean, we should remember Texas is a red state, but whereas in most years, especially midterms, it's like, you know, probably like a 10-1 margin. This year it was basically 2-1.
In Texas, it was more like 3-2 or 1.5-1 based off what I've been seeing.
Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry, I wasn't a math major, but
minor actually.
Minor, yeah. But yeah. So I mean, that's great. You know, you're seeing all these people coming out. You know, what do you guys think? Is this mostly like the Trump bump, or is this part of a more, progressive wave?
I don't know. I'm going to say that right now. I don't know. I did hear on NPR that actually Texas not only is the Democratic Party in Texas running a record number of women, it is actually running someone for every seat available. So it's not just a record number of women. It's the Democratic Party is actually trying to oust the Republicans out of their seats in earnest. I do know that the Democratic candidate who won the primary is a Bernie-crat. He's a progressive.
And O'Rourke?
Wait,
are we talking about the guy who's going to be taking on Ted Cruz?
Yeah, that's Beto O'Rourke. So, he's a Bernie-crat. I don't know if I'd call him a full progressive quite, because I heard like from an interview from one of his primary opponents on Redacted Tonight that he's taken some money from some not too progressive areas. Like I don't know if I don't remember exactly, but like at least one PAC connected to Chuck Schumer and another that might be connected to Big Pharma. I could be remembering this wrong, and I haven't double checked this just yet. He's also said some positive things about NAFTA, and though he says he's in favor of Medicare for all, he hasn't co-sponsored it in the House. At least he might have between the last time he got confronted about it. But
I mean, it's one of those things where really anything the Democrats can get in Texas is a good thing.
Yeah.
If we get rid of Ted, I want a Christian theocracy Cruz out of office, that would be great. Because that dude wants a Christian theocracy. He wants a Christian ISIS. Get out of office, you constitutionally unconstitutional person. Ted Cruz is a terrible senator. He's just awful.
Oh yeah, and possibly the Zodiac killer.
It has not been confirmed that he's not. Yeah. So the possibility exists.
What disturbs me more about Ted Cruz is not that he might be the Zodiac killer. It's more that I hope this was a gaffe, but he mentioned something about wanting to carpet bomb the Middle East one time in a debate.
Oh, I mean that wasn't a gaffe. It was.
Oh, seriously?
Well, in the Republican debates last year, I know what you're talking about. Like, it was like, who can out-hawk one another? And he literally talks about, like, you know, I wonder how hot does sand have to get to turn into glass?
Bad words.
Yeah, no, don't worry. We've got a button for that.
It is one of those things like that kind of that out hawking one another is still kind of going on, even though it's more trying to cajole one another into being okay with more war.
Oh, and they all do that. I mean, what the whole
which is just ridiculous.
The Democrats in Congress right now is like, why aren't you being more hawkish against the world's second largest nuclear superpower?
Why are you not like hammering Trump on the illegal war in Yemen? Hey,
like a certain independent senator from Vermont did the other day. Kudos to him.
Actually, there's been a little bit of a transpartisan, like there's starting to be a group that's going around trying to end the war on Yemen. So like, it's just getting kicked off. There's only a few senators on it. So it's still to gain momentum, but it may actually lead to challenging more of the presidential war powers in general. So keep an eye on that one. But going back to the Texas primaries, so I only did like as much research within reason because there's a lot of candidates statewide. Texas is a big state. It's a populous state. It's a populous state, I should say. And it's got a really wide surface area, so there's a lot of seats to keep track of course. So I couldn't tell you exactly what's going on in the state legislature primaries, but in the Congress if you look specifically at the Justice Democrats organization, which is a good way to keep track of who's running as a progressive in the U.S. Congress. There's about a third of them went to runoffs, about another third of them lost, and another third of them won their primaries respectively. And one of those runoffs was the same person that got attacked by the Deep Triple C recently, so she's still got a shot, and she's not even far behind. In fact, she might have got a slightly better results before the runoff than this one. So I guess first impressions of what's going on in a primary in what's like a large red state is a good example of what we could see basically countrywide, because unfortunately, as it stands, most states are red, of course, and this will be a very good. I feel like Texas is a very good sample of what to expect the progressive Dem-Enter movement to look like moving forward. Of course, with Illinois, that's a whole other story. We can get to that.
I mean,
real soon.
You're still gonna have to keep an eye. The big thing that you're gonna have to keep an eye on, though, is what the messaging from each individual candidate is on policy. And honestly, this is something that Kyle Kulinski goes on and on and on about, and it's something that I completely agree with him, because that's how you get things done, is you stop talking about all the bullcrap that's superfluous and Hollywoodish and reality drama TV, not paying so much attention to that you get caught up in the whirlpool that it creates, but rather staying focused on policy. Like, go ahead and make comment on it, for sure, but stay focused on policy. Advocate for Medicare for all, advocate for a living wage, advocate for a New Deal, advocate for legalization of marijuana, advocate for abolishing or forgiving and erasing the crimes of people who were imprisoned for nonviolent drug crimes and releasing them from prison. Be on the issues that the majority of America agrees with you on. Because if you stay on the issues that the majority of America agrees with you on, especially nationally and statewide, you're going to get more people to vote for you because more people agree with you.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So, one of the things that, kind of good news. So we got this guy who, I mean, he's at least I'd say more progressive than most in the Democratic Party, and that's good.
He's no Joe Kennedy III.
No. Yeah.
I'd say he's like a guy Elizabeth Warren,
Yeah. However, it's still kind of up in the air with, the other kind of high-profile progressive candidate we mentioned, and that would be Laura Moser. And what happened with that one, the race was so close, as far as the results went, that there's going to be a runoff election happening in May. Very recently, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee released an opposition memo on her just a few weeks ago. And, usually the Democrats have this weird thing where they're not trying to, oppose the Bernie wing in a way that is super out in the open. They'll speak in terms of bringing people together. I mean, obviously, you look at the DNC chair race, that was obviously to make sure Keith Ellison, the Bernie guy, did not become chair. But, this is something most of the public is not going to see and engage with. However, when you are releasing, basically dirt on one of your own candidates in a high-profile primary, I'd say that's kind of overstepping. You're playing your cards. You're saying we don't want somebody this far to the left to run.
It just goes to show that when that happens, when you do get that kind of resistance from the party that is ostensibly supposed to be your support, it just shows where the Overton window is in America, and how much you're not supposed to challenge capitalism, and how much you're not supposed to challenge the donor class, and how much you're not supposed to challenge the people who are in charge, which is the whole point of the freaking democracy, is to challenge the people in charge. And to continuously challenge the people in charge. When it's one of those things where democracy is best when everybody is informed and engaged, and if you are uninformed and complacent, well, then the ruling class gets to do whatever the heck they want, and you get to suffer for it. This tax bill. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see my return this year. I really hope that we can flip something in 2 more years and get something passed that doesn't screw over the American people over the next 10 years. I'd really like to see that happen.
Yeah. Another thing about it too is some of the defense that they put out for doing this kind of digging up this dirt on their own candidate is she is too far left to win in this district.
It's such a load of crap.
Well, not only that, because because I would say, you know what? If you said that a year ago, I might be like, you know what?
Maybe you have a point. Maybe you have a point. But
yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, this specific this smear job, so to speak, that the DCCC did claimed that this candidate was trash talking the area that she was running, whether it was Houston or Texas in general. I don't remember. I'm not sure if this was even true or not. And if that is the case, then that might honestly be a bit of a cause for concern more than she's too left to run here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like if she's trash talking a part in her own district, then yeah, I'd be worried about that too if I was the party. But I guess it makes a great excuse to go after a progressive.
Well, yeah. From what I recall, it was taken out of context, and I think
everybody loves to do that to the people further to the left of them. The left does it to the right too, for sure. But at the same time, you only ever see it damage people on the left. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Honestly, the whole I'm going to go back to the whole. Oh, she's too far left to run, being complete garbage. You guys, we had, in one of the special elections last year, we had a Democratic Socialist get no support from the Democratic Party at all, and he flipped the seat from Republican to, I believe he...
It was the majority whip seat.
Yeah, it's the majority whip seat. It was the guy who... No, that's a different one. But
This is in Virginia.
Yeah, it was in Virginia. But at the same time, it's just like you actively snubbed a Democratic socialist in what you thought to be a relatively safe Republican seat, even though you were challenging for it, and he's the dude who won.
Yeah.
So there is no such thing as too far left. I'm sorry.
It's like, well, the memo they still haven't gotten is it's not even so much where you're at on the political spectrum anymore. It's how well can you sell populism. That's what is winning elections right now. How well can you sell populism?
Thanks, Donald Trump.
If it's the populist right or the populist left, people are just, they want whoever's against the establishment, I'm with them. And if you get elections where it's, somebody in the center, you'll either lose or win by the tiniest of margins, even if your opponent is a child molester. Yeah.
So, I still do think it's necessary to get rid of Republican majorities wherever we can. And it does also matter that there's more women that ran in Texas ever. It matters that there's 2 Latina women that could become the first congresspeople from Texas, as well as the first lesbian congressperson from Texas. Also is a big deal. However, it's more necessary that we get policies pushed through that actually affect the people that desperately need it. I think no more is this sort of left punching from the Democrats more obvious than in the race in Illinois the primary in Illinois' 3rd congressional district, where the incumbent is an anti-gay, anti-choice Democrat who's got all kinds of big money connections. And do you want to talk about Illinois for a little bit? It's the next one coming up. Okay, so Illinois is important not only because it's the next primary to be coming up, but also I was born there actually, and I still have a lot of family there, so I'm going to be watching this very closely. So this, what's his name? Let me pull up the article.
Well, are we talking about Daniel Biss? I did meet Mr. Biss a while ago.
That's for governor. No,
that's a gubernatorial race.
I'll get to that soon enough. All right, so Representative Dan Lipinski is the incumbent of Illinois' 3rd congressional district, challenged by Maureen Newman, who has support not only from Our Revolution and Justice Democrats, but also Emily's List, which is considered by many to be very establishment. I'd say it's more single issue, and they're absolutely right to get on board for her with this because they support pro-choice Democratic women, and the fact that we have an anti-queer, anti-choice Democrat incumbent in the first place is just gross, on top of the fact that he's getting plenty of support from the Illinois party. And in that same district, we were talking about Nazis just earlier, but this is a heavily Democratic district, right? But there's a Republican running who used to be with the American Nazi Party.
It's that guy.
Yeah, this is all in the same district, which is...
my goodness.
So,
man.
This be really
an anti-gay, anti-choice Democrat, or the literal former leader of the American Nazi Party. There are your choices, guys.
But, okay, there is a decent candidate in the mix.
Thank goodness.
Yes, there is. I think they're the only 3 people in that entire race, as far as I can tell. Thank God that keeps it simple enough.
And I will say, too, for Emily's List on their behalf, they have endorsed a lot of very corporate female candidates before, but their litmus test isn't a lot of backroom stuff. It's very single-minded, but it's not that they're going to withhold an endorsement from you if you're progressive or socialist. It's they have certain rubrics when it comes to how well do you fundraise, which usually it's only corporate candidates can make those.
Yeah, that's corporate in itself. Yeah. So,
but just to kind of throw that out there for Emily's List. It's about 6:30. Maybe time to take a break. We can hop on. I want to cover at least 2 more of the topics we brought up. Maybe I'm thinking the banking issue, and I'd like to talk about the LGBT justice stuff that you brought up to us, because I thought that was really interesting. There's also there's an Intercept article about spying that's quite interesting, but I don't know if we'll have time to get to it. Anyway, you're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Alvan Humane Society is a non-for-profit, no-kill animal shelter that has been serving Allegan, Van Buren, and surrounding areas for almost 50 years. They are hosting their CARES Fund Drive and are over halfway to their $500,000 goal. Alvan can currently house around 30 dogs and 100 cats. Money raised from the CARES campaign will go to build a new shelter, which will expand this capacity by 20%. Alvan Humane Society has 20 dogs and 40 cats that are microchipped, spayed and neutered, and fully vaccinated, ready for adoption right now. To adopt a pet, donate to the CARES Fund Drive, or find out more, feel free to visit them on the web at www.al-van.org.
Wider Battle of the Bands would like to thank Kelvin & Co. for supporting Radio Evolution. Located at 232 East Michigan Avenue, Kelvin & Co. is an all-natural barbecue joint. To find more information about their food options, you can call 269-350-5236 or visit kelvinandcompany.com.
I like digging holes and hiding things inside them. When I grow old, I hope.
Hey, we're back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So actually, a few more thoughts about the primary race before we dig into the other topics. Nora?
So other interesting stuff that's going on in Illinois, like in the Illinois Democratic primary for governor, there's three main runners. One guy, J.B. Pritzker, I believe it's pronounced. He's a self-funding running billionaire that, of course, has the support of the state party because he's able to self-fund mainly, versus another Kennedy who's actually, also kind of, I'd say, an Elizabeth Warren Democrat, versus Daniel Bliss is mentioned, who's very much to the left. So I think that's it's anyone's game, in my opinion. And even the incumbent Republican governor has sent attack ads on YouTube against Pritzker, which might be to his own demise, because it could shoot Pritzker in the primary and give him a tougher opponent to beat when their incumbent governor is Republican governor is super unpopular. And I think he'll lose the primary to that one racist white lady who made that crazy ad that went viral for a bit.
Oh man. Yeah.
But what else is going on? So
I missed that one. I'm gonna have to find it.
Oh, it was on TYT.
I like rage watching things.
So in the 4th congressional district, that's where Representative Luis Gutierrez stepped down recently. There's two candidates who both support Medicare for all. Both aren't taking corporate money, but one of them just a little bit to the left of others. That would be Ramirez Rosa versus Jesus Garcia. And I'd say it's more about just how far to the left the progressive movement wants to go, whether they want to be explicitly socialist and support BDS against the actions of the state of Israel, versus we mostly want single payer and more of the isolationist progressive stuff that we might have seen in early on in the Bernie Sanders campaign of 16. So
speaking of BDS, the one complaint I do have about Daniel Bliss, and I will say he is anti-corporate. He's not. Has a lot of really strong progressive positions, but there were certain donors that he had that were very concerned that his original running mate was part of the BDS movement, and he picked a different one for that reason because of pressure from a couple of his donors. He kind of buckled on the issue of Palestine.
That last I read, that actually was Ramirez Rosa.
Ramirez Rosa. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
so Rumors Rose as a card-carrying DSA member, by the way.
Yep.
One other thing in the Illinois Democratic Party, this is in the institutional party itself of the state. There's a couple people trying to run for the central committee, which is like, does stuff with rules and bylaws. And two of them, one of the party higher-ups is already like trying to smear for being progressive. That what their talking point is that they're linked to the Tea Party because they're on represent.us.
Oh, dude, my friend Elizabeth Lindquist got swept up in that. I think she's actually her face is on the ad. Yeah, colleague of mine who done. Yeah, we Democracy Spring, and I bumped into her at several like progressive conventions and stuff. But
say hi to her for me.
Yeah, I'll do that. And I guess like that's a badge of honor until you get smeared. For, yeah. Represent Us, by the way, I love what they do. Very strong, money out of politics. If you've ever seen the YouTube video "Corruption is Legal in America," that's them. And like, what an disingenuous smear, because I think what they're getting at is like Represent Us is a coalition of progressives and conservatives who want money out of politics.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah. It's weird how the left and the right can agree on things that deal with integrity.
Yeah.
Weird.
Wow. Yes. Yep. But okay. Well, anything else on that topic? I think it's about 6:40. I want to spend like maybe 10 minutes each on these last two topics.
Let's go for it.
All right. So, I guess why don't we talk a little bit about this article you pointed out from Wayne County. Particularly like you, Nora, as a trans woman, I want to get your take on this, but maybe I'll read a little bit from the article so people get some context real quick. Then we could dive a little deeper into it. The Fair Michigan Justice Project, and that's a collaboration between the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office and the advocacy group Fair Michigan. They are going to be doing an important new approach for hate crimes, pursuing hate crimes against people who are LGBTQ. The Wayne County Prosecutor, Kim Worthy, and Fair Michigan Justice President Dana Nessel, who's also running for Attorney General's BTW, talked a little bit about it. We talked a little bit about actually, I'm going a little into the weeds here. But the bottom line is they are basically going to be educating their officers and investigators on how to show respect to their victims and how to understand the dynamics of these hate crimes better. Nora, as a trans woman, what does this kind of news mean to you? And could you explain a little bit, maybe more to the people at home, to understand kind of the ins and outs of what the implications of this are?
Yeah, well, Michigan's actually pretty bad for anti-LGBTQ hate crimes, and I haven't had to deal with a ton of street harassment, or I haven't been like attacked just yet. But if I'm presenting and I'm out at night by myself, then I'm worried. I got my hand on my pepper spray as much as any woman walking alone at night in a city might be. Mm-hmm. So I'm wary. I'm watchful, and I feel safe, like, relatively in Kalamazoo compared to, like, if I was in another city, whether it was larger or, less accepting or whatever, then it wouldn't be as bad. But it's still something that I have to be careful of, I feel like, even as someone with as much privilege as I do, like, former suburbanite, white, thin, can, fit into enough of Eurocentric beauty standards, but it's still a lot of effort to get there in the first place. So, I forgot where I was going with this. So it's important that, they're starting to be creating a task force for this, for stopping hate crimes, because the hate crime laws in Michigan are very weak, and we still, like, I'm going to say it over and over so people don't forget about it, that we don't have employment or housing protections in about half the state. Mm-hmm. So these kind of things are necessary, and I'm glad that Dana Nessel and the the Wayne County prosecutor are really putting in the work on this, because they've been really able to help some people out. And so if you're LGBTQ and you've been a victim of a hate crime, go give this organization, ring them up. What's the name of them again?
Oh, was it Fair Michigan Justice Project?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I want to read from a quote here real quick. This is from Nacelle, Dana Nacelle. And she says, I think the transgender community really has it the worst. It's something that I had suspected, but then my fears were confirmed through our work in this project, is that a lot of people who are victimized, who are trans, are victimized specifically because they are left in a place where they are much more vulnerable than the rest of the population. And she goes on to say that there are no protections for sexual orientation or gender identity in the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, or even in Michigan's Ethnic Intimidation Act. It can be difficult for trans folks to get jobs and safe housing, so they often end up in the street where they are much more vulnerable.
And that's why, trans women and trans women of color especially are so much more likely to get killed of a hate crime than a lot of other demographics. And it's not just in these backwoods nowhere towns in floating around all over Michigan. It's also even in heavily blue areas like Detroit, the trans women of color are getting killed like crazy out there, and it's tragic to see happen. And it gets underreported unless you see it on some alternate news sites, and there's always a disturbing count of how many trans women are killed each year, and it keeps on getting higher, and it's depressing. And this is why we really need organizations like this. So I would call on other states to or other local bodies of certain states to really put this kind of work in to protect the communities that need it, especially with since the public opinion for LGBTQ people has really gone down in very recent times. It's just below 50% would say that they support LGBTQ people, which is a noticeable dive since the Obergefell versus Hobbs, which is the same-sex marriage ruling, Supreme Court. Of course, public opinion has shifted tremendously in our favor over the past few decades, but seeing it go back below 50 is concerning. And sometimes I still have to wonder, who can I trust? Who is going to respect me as a woman? Who's going to acknowledge me for who I am? Who's going to not misgender me, whether they're the mayor or whether they're
anybody,
or will I not get fired? Stuff like that. These are the questions I have to ask, unless I'm in a specific space that I know is very, very friendly to people like me. It's not as much something that happens to the LGBT community, although they do still deal with nonsense from cishets, I'll say. Because you often can't tell that just by looking at someone, unless you have a cis guy dressed very flamboyantly, or a butch lesbian. It's not super obvious if someone's gay or bisexual or whatever, but oftentimes you can tell if someone's trans, and that's another reason why these hate crimes will happen, because someone will know, and it's almost always a man who does it, and it threatens their manhood to feel like they're attracted to a woman. Some nonsense. It threatens their masculinity, and they go crazy. And
y'all need to get on this Captain Jack Harkness train, because that man is not only one of the manliest men I've ever seen on television, but he will pork pretty much anything that moves. So really, what's going on?
I say Doctor Who's actually been doing pretty well on okay. That's a completely different topic. I'm sorry.
I just say that because it's really one of those things where we have examples of actual good characters in fiction that present themselves as very inherently masculine, but then also their preferences range wildly. It's one of those things where that example can be an example for so many people who have this fragile kind of super tight definition that if it's challenged in any way, it just falls apart.
Fragile masculinity, is that kind of what?
Oh yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's weird.
And I'm really glad that we've got this effort to particularly like educating police because and again, we talked on the show, we don't really have a rosy picture of modern policing. Ideally, it would be abolished, but it certainly can't hurt to have the officers trained on this sort of thing, which I think is something that there has been a really terrible lack of, and you can't really understand the dimensions of a hate crime unless you understand the marginalized group and the nature of the hate they face.
I'd say with the police specifically, it's gotten the way that the LGBTQ community have been treated by the police has also significantly gotten way better, because that's what the Stonewall riots were about. Queer people were getting raided, having their homes raided by the police, and until Marsha P. Johnson started throwing bricks, and they were fed up.
Yeah.
But you still see a lot of the white gay community be a little bit too comfortable with the police almost. That's something I'm starting to. I'm a little bit suspicious of, and I think that queer people should remember their history before jumping to those kind of conclusions.
Well, that's true.
Remember, the police are really only here to protect the ruling class.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Also, in terms of our huge mass incarceration problem as well, that if queer people get locked up, what's going to happen to them. They're at a bigger risk if they get caught doing something, whether it's should or should not be legal.
And it's still pretty common practice for trans women to be jailed as men, and again, the problem you just mentioned,
and they wonder why our suicide rates are so high.
All right. So I think with that, why don't we go ahead and talk a little bit about this last topic? We mentioned it a little bit at the beginning of the program, but there is some stuff going through Congress right now where, it reminds me of an old George Carlin joke. Don't ever look forward to things that are bipartisan, because that just means that both sides have agreed on the best way to screw us over.
It's very true.
We're getting screwed from both sides.
One of Mother Jones did drop an article actually about not even an hour ago. Elizabeth Warren, I'm still really, I'm with you on most things. I just wish you would do more.
Oh yeah,
but
when it comes to taking on the banks,
but when it comes to this topic, she is a freaking firebrand.
Yeah,
she is letting her party have it over this.
Yep.
And I really hope that Stabenow really pays attention to this.
And Peters.
Peters isn't up for election this year, though.
And let me give some context real quick before we dig a little deeper into that. So it was Tuesday, and 16 Senate Democrats, including Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters, joined with 50 Republicans to advance a bill that's it's going to roll back some key financial regulations that got passed after 2008, and these are regulations that were poised to prevent a crisis like that from happening again, and it would exempt 25 of the nation's 40 largest banks from being subject to heightened scrutiny by the Federal Reserve. If it passes, it would be the biggest weakening of the Dodd-Frank Act since it was signed into law in 2010. And the 67-32 vote in favor of a motion to proceed now will send the bill back to the floor for debate and possible amendments. So that's good because it means this isn't quite over, but it's bad because, again, like I said, two of our two Michigan senators are on the side of loosening the reins around these banks. And I just did want to point out something about how they're trying to defend this bill, and they're saying we Mark Warner particularly talked about how we've been working on this for years. It's going to help community banks and credit unions.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. But it's such a broad net that it basically is going to help out these tremendously wealthy banks with a hell of a lot of influence, like Deutsche Bank, and I'm trying to think of another example, Citibank, etc. That I would certainly not describe as a community bank or like a local credit union.
I mean, things like American Express as well. Apparently, the CBO has found that the bill that passed on Tuesday, if it makes it to law, would grow our deficit spending by another $671 million over the next 9 years. So, just keep on tacking on to that deficit spending, guys. Just keep doing it.
Somewhere Rand Paul is getting drunk and miserable. Oh, man.
Hey, if next time they propose legislation that might actually help us, the deficit hawks will start to come out of nowhere, and then they'll say, we can't spend that. We can't build the deficit,
Oh, so it's only okay when we're giving all that money away to the rich.
The Elizabeth Warren poll quote here that I've run into, this bill wouldn't be on the path to becoming law without the support of these Democrats. This, speaking about the Democrats who voted on the bill for it. The Senate just voted to increase the chances your money will be used to bail out big banks again. And this kind of goes along, I was just scrolling through the Our Politics on Reddit, just scanning headlines. Bill Gates, one of those capitalist oligarchs that has spent the better part of the last 20 years revivifying his image as a benevolent benefactor and not a ruthless capitalist. Bill Gates is predicting another financial collapse at least equal to 2008 in the near future.
Wonderful.
And, I'm actually kind of there with him because our the student debt crisis is in the trillions of dollars. Credit card debt is actually the second biggest, I believe, amount of debt that exists in America. It's also huge, and people aren't getting help with that. So our debt crises are huge, and then the weakening of Dodd-Frank, which is already too weak.
Oh, yeah.
From anybody with any kind of regulatory sense about how to keep recessions from happening, i.e. reinstitute Glass-Steagall, Dodd-Frank's already really weak on this, and weakening it further runs the risk of making it completely ineffective, which means that the market would then be open again to another large bubble and another large bust. And that's how you financially destabilize a country and throw it into complete chaos.
Oh yeah. And there are literally historians, people who have spent their career studying and researching the Great Depression, that have basically said we are literally if that was a deliberate plan, we would be following it. And the sad thing is it isn't that. And I would say there is. I wouldn't call it ignorance, but I'd say it's cognitive dissonance combined with, if you're rich, you have this certain kind of beer goggles that prevents you from seeing bad outcomes that can occur for the middle and working class. Highly recommended book. I'm currently reading it right now. It is called The New Human Rights Movement. And there's this great chapter where he's talking about kind of the psychology of the rich and the elite. And it's not necessarily that they don't understand these concepts. It's that they codify this particular point of view because their privilege makes it more difficult for them to see it from any other angle. So to them, oh yes, it's going to help these banks. I'm sure they won't do it again. This is going to help the economy. Of course, they're also making a lot of money from these same banks, and it blinds them to the fact that these kind of actions are exactly what led to the Great Depression of the 1930s.
It's the exact same. The exact same kind of practices that led to the internet bubble bursting in early 2000s. The same kind of legislation that resulted in the housing market crisis in 2008. And, honestly, we've had two big crashes in the last 20 years. Two big crashes, and they've been spaced out approximately 10 years apart. So actually, we're a little overdue at this point with the trickle-down capitalism that we keep on trying to make happen that will never work. Because every single time we've tried to make it work, we've had an enormous growth, and all of the rich people were super happy with it, while regular people were like, okay, well, the economy's doing really good, and that must be a good thing, even though I'm not seeing any direct benefits from that, and all of a sudden I lost my house. How'd that happen?
Yep, that's exactly right.
So, one thing I noticed about this de facto Dodd-Frank repeal is that it needs 60 votes in the Senate to pass. So, if we get only 7 of these Democrats to not vote for it, then we can block it off at least for a little bit.
Oh yeah.
So call Stabenow, call Peters. I believe public pressure eventually got them to, give a damn about DACA.
Yeah, it did. And I would mention too, you're exactly right, Nora. This is not a done deal. It's a motion to proceed. Now they're going to debate about it, and if enough people call them up, let them at least let them know people are paying attention to this. We do not want you to give more free rein to the banks. It might at least give them the courage to negotiate in some manner or form, because the Republicans, they're going to need Democratic votes for this to pass, and you would think if they wanted to, they could use that as leverage to make sure that this doesn't benefit the biggest of the big banks. But
yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
One thing I also want to point out, very recently, the price of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies has been going down. And the reason why Bitcoin was created in the first place was in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. So it's entirely likely that shortly after our next crash happens, that cryptocurrency could go back up, and the money that exists right now that is currently completely controlled by the elites is something that we might be able to start working around. So I know not a lot of normal average Joes don't know a whole lot about cryptocurrency, but I say now's the time to start doing your research. I'm not going to get into that right now. We don't have enough time. 2 hours probably wouldn't be enough.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, really, the only thing I'm going to say about cryptocurrency is money isn't real. It's a construct. Bitcoin, if you're going to laugh at the idea of, well, Bitcoin's going to be the next currency, it only exists in cyberspace. It's not actually real. The dollar bill in your wallet isn't actually real. It's a piece of paper. It represents money because we as a society have decided that money means something. Like the $20 bill in your wallet is just as ephemeral as Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Garlicoin, any kind of cryptocurrency is. So.
And it's not controlled by the Federal Reserve, which has it in its interest to make sure that the working class is always desperate. But again, we need to spend a lot of time with it. Although there's a real good article in The Nation about that, which I just picked it up yesterday, and it describes what the Federal Reserve does that hurts the working class.
I love reading articles about how centralized banks actually hurt the worker, actually hurt the working force.
But we're currently going over a little bit. Y'all got any final thoughts?
To follow up with that, and I guess connect to previous points, Peter Joseph's first Zeitgeist movie also talks about the Federal Reserve in part 3 of that movie. So, and it's history about helping the rich even in its earliest forms, and why the British Central Bank was part of the reason why the U.S. revolted against them in the first place. So check out Zeitgeist. I'm going to read the new Human Rights Movement eventually. That book looks real good.
It is good. It's pretty dense though. I haven't Usually I finish those books pretty quick, but I've been taking my time with this one. All right. I want to thank y'all for listening. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. I want to invite y'all to tune in next week and for the next couple weeks, because we'll have a very special treat for you. We're doing a series of interviews with the 6th District congressional candidates. And I do believe coming up next week on March 14th, we are going to have David Bannock and on, I believe, about 5:30 p.m. So, this has been the Hoodrat Strategist Radio Show. Thanks for listening, and keep on fighting for that revolution solution.